that is sentience. That is, and some people say I'm one of the people who says that plants, I have some plants around me. I love plants. They are
Mhm.
clearly sentient because they're responsive
Yeah.
to my energy and all of that. Um, and I think that's the realm of empathy where we are feeling the feelings of another through our own feeling capacity. And there is an intuition there. When we do counseling, for example, if somebody is clearly upset, and I start feeling their feeling in some way, it's sort of second chakra, it's down below the navel. I'll kind of interrogate it and I'll check it out with them and say, what I'm hearing you say, or what I'm feeling you say, is as if there's despair here. And trying to name what I'm feeling to establish a sense of connection. That relies on empathy. Without that feeling sense, it's hard to really connect with someone
Hmm.
other than compassion being an idea, a good idea. So the importance of empathy, and yet we have to be cautious with it because empathy, we can take on someone's suffering and have empathetic distress, where we're taking it on and it fatigues us. Or I know that Swami has done, he did his CPE residency earlier this year. So he knows what it's like to be in a hospital environment, for 8 hours or however long, and just it can be fatiguing if all you're doing is empathy. Compassion, on the other hand, is really quite extraordinary in that it's energizing always.
Uh-huh.
Now, that said, there is this term compassion fatigue, which is kind of a misnomer. It's what we're bringing into the compassion that is fatiguing, more so than just the freedom of the heart to express caring and concern and a sense of unity and what we might call oneness through compassion. Compassion coming with wisdom, with discernment, and also really being able to see the helplessness of the suffering that we're encountering because nobody wants to suffer. It's not a choice. We may make choices that cause us to suffer. But that's the other part from a Buddhist view, is when we're encountering suffering, we're also encountering helplessness. And so being able to recognize that and kind of open the heart and almost unify with someone, basically enter in with them on this journey, is more around the wisdom quality, which also requires some equanimity. We never really talk
Yeah.
about empathy and equanimity, but we always talk about compassion and equanimity as supporting each other.
Oh, okay. So you're saying compassion and equanimity are much more closely bonded than empathy and equanimity. Is that
I
what?
think so, largely because compassion is more sapient than sentient in many ways. It has the sentient quality, it has the responsive quality, but it's also an insight, it's a knowing, and it's a sort of connecting through experience rather than just feeling. Yeah,
Okay.
sensory feeling. Yeah. So it's very nuanced. I think, empathy matters to be compassionate. And therefore, compassion also relies on equanimity to be stable. So we're kind of balancing these different things. Yeah. And then how to respond. What
Yeah.
does this person really need? And that
Yeah.
requires really good listening,
Yeah. Is
really
that
hearing through the heart.
does that also require it's not about me, it's about this person going through this very extremely difficult period of their lives, and I am
Mhm.
here as almost doing savor to help them cross over rather than me taking on the emotion, which it often doesn't have that much value. But if you hear them and you're
Right.
saying, it's not about me, it's about what you're going through, and I'm here to service you. Is that, would
Mhm.
you say more about compassion than
Yes,
sympathy?
I think that's true. And yet there are moments where in which I've been doing a counseling session with someone and I'm really moved by what they're telling me, almost moved to tears sometimes. And that doesn't mean that I'm in danger or, that there's anything wrong. In fact, that person may feel really understood, really heard because, I'm sharing the feeling with them. That's profound. That is really profound. It's not just someone trying to problem solve or fix things, but it's that someone really gets my experience. So much suffering has us feel alone,
Uh,
isolated, you know. So the notion that somebody really sees me, understands what I'm going through, and remains in the thick of it with me compassionately without condition. And that's the other thing is compassion is seen to be unconditional.
oh,
Nothing that they tell me will will make me judge them as despicable or
yeah.
as someone who is a bad person or anything, because then we get into morality, we get into the dualism. Yeah.
Um, Chris, so I want to tell you that I first have to apologize. It appears that the wrong link was sent. I don't quite understand it, but it appears, did you guys get the wrong link sent to you?
Yeah, I couldn't. So sorry, I couldn't open this meeting. It was opening to Pravradika Divyananda Prada's meeting.
Okay.
So I went to Zoom, and but the ID and passcode are correct. So once I
Okay.
manually entered ID and passcode, then I was able to get in.
So I've been on the phone, so I've talked to the person who's sending it out, so we resent the link. So okay, so more people are coming in now, Chris, as you start to see.
Yep.
So I want to open it up. We're having a question and answer session with Chris. So I apologize for the wrong link was sent. So if you have a question, please then go ahead and raise your hand. And I think more people are coming. We just sent resending the link. So
And it's
yes.
nice to see some familiar faces. I recognize actually everybody on here, and it's so nice to connect with you again. Yeah, it was really a lovely retreat. And Swami, you were brilliant in the entire process. So I hope you've gotten some rest since June, even though I know your lack of sleep today.
I have to tell you that Chris not only was he essential in not only his gift as a speaker, but also we had him as the kirtan, but most importantly, I'd say as the sound engineer. We did not have a sound engineer. He did everything, setting up the speakers, and it was not easy. So we have to give our hats off to Chris for
Oh,
playing
hey,
three roles in one there.
Divesh and Subir were the real heroes with all of that. So, they really made it all happen.
Okay.
Um,
All right.
but
So now
yeah,
we're
Thank you.
getting
it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
right, so let's go ahead, Nile, and we're gonna have questions coming up, Chris. So go ahead. Go ahead,
Hi,
ask your
Neelam.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much for taking this time. Truly appreciate. So my question was connected with the meditation. So I know you walked us through a specific pathway of the meditation wherein we are looking and understanding other people and understanding other people's what they're going through and trying to live through it or work through it. I was wondering from the standpoint of the meditation, because I think for me that is way far out there. It's something that I can only one day hope that I can reach where I can bring somebody else's pains into mine and then work through it. But what are, from the Buddhist standpoint, from the meditations, what are some of the core starting point meditations? And is there some guidelines that you can give to us or give to me, please?
Yes, that's a great question. So the Buddha's 10th discourse was his teaching on mindfulness or sati. In the Sanskrit, it's smriti, remembering that which is remembered. And he says, like one of the very first lines of that teaching, he says that sati, is all you need for the direct path to realization, the freedom from lamentation and sorrow, and the attainment of nibbana or nirvana. So mindfulness, and then he goes on and teaches about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, how to practice it. It's a very practical, accessible sutra, and it's also very short too. And then he goes on and down the road teaches anapanasati, which is mindfulness of breathing. And so really the key starting place is mindfulness and breath meditation. As part of sort of a larger set of practices that we call shamatha, which is very similar to ekagrata, which is one-pointedness of mind, focusing on an object of meditation, and using that object as an anchor, and also paying attention to who is bearing witness to the object. We do that in mindfulness with our breathing, and yet we're not creating a dualism. We are rather experiencing the breath as fully as possible. We're experiencing the body, the 4 elements, which later became 6 elements in Vajrayana Buddhism. But it all starts with mindfulness of breathing, of contemplating the body, the anatomical parts, contemplating feeling, contemplating thoughts, and ultimately seeing through insight the impermanent nature of all of these arisings and all that disperses. So just by focusing on breath, by concentrating our attention on our breath and on the present, the mind is able to stabilize a bit, and in that stabilization, there is a settling that happens. And in that settling, there is a natural arising of calm, of peacefulness. So that's kind of what we might call the mechanism that is so key to meditation. And then that starts to yield a sense of clarity, where the mind settles, the mind becomes clearer and sharper. And ultimately, just by doing these practices, we may even become aware of simply this presence of mindfulness. So what Swami and I have discussed in the past, and we used to sit over coffee for a long time and just engage in a furious dialogue about sakshin and awareness and presence and all of these things. But really, it begins by relinquishing effort and opening oneself through breath. And then it's not that we progress into quote unquote more advanced states, but we deepen what we know. We deepen and extend the time perhaps of the practice. So in many Buddhist traditions, there is no necessarily advanced meditations, but there is, like in Zen sitting meditation, so that your mind is revealed to you more and more as you practice. Now, in Tantric Buddhism, so my tradition, Vajrayana, there are very sort of more complex kinds of meditations that involve visualizing deities and elements and chakras and moving energy and postures and mudras and all of those things. I've personally benefited tremendously from those things, but it's a very different approach. But the thing that grounds all of it is mindfulness. Yeah, and just cultivating a way in through simplicity, through a nice sweet balance between effortlessness and just enough effort to be present. Yeah. Does that help? Oh, and you're muted, so we can't hear you.
Sorry, there we go. I was trying not to have any sounds there. Swami, is it okay? Can I ask a question? Continue?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So, Chris, on that basis, when we start with basically focusing on the breath and then the mind calms down, and I've felt that so part of the meditation rituals, I can feel that calming that happens. And then you're saying the next step then is deepening, which is I understand lengthening of the time, but can you explain a little bit when you talk about deepening, when your mind stabilizing, what is the deepening there?
I can tell you how I've experienced it, and that is that the more that I'm able to settle in and let go into that space of deep relaxation, and the breath helps. So like lengthening the duration of the inhale, the exhale, is that what begins to arise is a very subtle but very profound sense of fullness without content. So it is a sense of that presence that has no clutter. You have no projecting. The mind is no longer projecting. We're no longer taking the Maya and spinning it into narratives, into things we like, don't like, things that are real or unreal, but just simply letting all of that go and then allowing the fullness of awareness to simply open and arise naturally. One of the people, so the leader of one of the Buddhist communities that I teach through, Natural Dharma Fellowship, she calls that natural awareness. And what distinguishes natural awareness simply from awareness is the road to getting there. It's natural, so we don't have to fabricate anything or create anything. It's already there. It's already present in each of us. And so it's more sort of revealing the secret hidden places that go unnoticed for so many of our lives. It's a beautiful thing.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Nile. Lali.
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Lali. Oh, we can't hear
We
you.
cannot hear you.
You have to unmute.
Mute. Oh,
There you go.
okay.
There you
Okay.
are. Hi,
Okay.
Lali.
Hi. Thank you so much for putting this together again over and over, Swami, and to you, Chris. Just that strong back, soft front has been so incredible when I'm talking to people. And but I want to know, because in a sense, I think it is also tying in for me with, okay, when we sit in meditation, the idea of keeping a firm back, okay, strong back, soft front to take in from the divine. And
Yeah.
similarly, when I'm talking to somebody, there are a lot of young people now who are, I think I seem to be interacting with, that are having these issues. Now,
Yeah.
do we do something differently with teenagers or early 20s compared to when you're talking with older people?
No.
That part, okay. The soft back, soft
And I'll
front
tell
is
you,
the thing. Yeah.
I teach a summer course through the Harvard Extension School it's a pre-college program for high school students. They're like 15 to 17. I just finished early August. I finished that up. And these kids are amazing. And I tell them right at the beginning, I say, what I'm teaching you, I teach grad students in college. So we're not dumbing this down. And I think they really appreciate being treated as they are, which is very smart.
Yeah.
Now, they also need space to ask questions. And of course, the minute I turn my back on the classroom, all the devices come out, and then this starts happening, and then when I turn around, they all go back down again. So, we're talking about teenagers. But really, I think one of the tasks as a meditation teacher is to, first of all, be aware of who is in the room, what is the level of practice experience people have, and always sort of strive to make the teachings, to simplify them, to make them accessible without sacrificing sort of the essence, the wisdom presence in those teachings. So we're always kind of balancing those two ends, so that as few people as possible are left behind or left confused. In the Buddhist tradition, we have this notion that it is actually unethical to use Dharma to confuse people. And so as teachers, it's important that we are skillful and able to speak and do the teaching in a way that is clear and isn't overcomplicating it so that people turn away from it. Yeah, that's bad karma. So
Makes sense. But
anyway, so I think practicing that, whether it's a teenager or an adult, pretty much at that age, their capacities aren't too different. Now, it's different if we're talking about children, 6-year-olds. I've worked with children. I love it, but you can't guide them through a 20-minute meditation. And they need something that is active, like to ask them, what does it feel like to be the sun?
oh,
And have them close their eyes and focus on their breathing and everything, but it's very short. We're talking maybe 5 minutes, because the attention of a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old can sometimes just flop around all over the place. So yeah, we don't want to give them too much, but yeah, they so that's some of the tweaking that I do. Yeah,
thank you so much. Thank you.
great question. Yeah.
Okay, Shreyasi?
Hello, Shreyasi. Nice seeing you again. I feel like I'm back in California in the Monterey Bay.
I know.
Just seeing all of you.
So my question was also related to the strong back, soft belly idea. So recently, I'll try to keep it really short. When I work as a therapist, I find that extremely useful. And I think it's a really good reminder to, and you had talked about what is empathy versus, just getting carried away and, taking all that on. So that makes complete sense. But recently, a very close friend of mine, I had a lot of vicarious trauma from this friend. She was going through a terrible, terrible abuse situation. So it lasted over a few days, and those lines just completely got blurred, even though I was trying to remind myself I'm not her therapist, but I was trying to help as a friend. But I was just wiped out at the end of it all. I was so stressed out, so traumatized by it. And then at the end of that, I was trying to process it, trying to think, so what happened? What happened here? Because this principle of the soft belly, strong back, it just, how could I have reminded myself? What could I have done when the lines got so blurred? So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on how to approach this when it's somebody really close and somebody who's really suffering and in a lot of pain and is just getting devastated by the situation. How can we still maintain some sanity?
Yeah, good question. So I think the first thing that I would say about that is that, and we mentioned this earlier when Glenda asked a question before everyone else sort of came into the room, and that is, the distinction between empathy and compassion. Empathy is a foundation for compassion. It's not the same thing, but it relies on empathy. Compassion relies on empathy and equanimity. So as you say, strong back, soft front, yes. Here's the thing, though, is we're talking about someone you care deeply about personally. And it's natural, I think, to sort of also feel helpless in helping, like a family member, a loved one, a close friend, someone you care deeply about and that you're invested in personally. It's different than taking the space of the therapist or the clinician and saying, okay, here's my role in this moment to really be there through these tools and through this connecting that I do professionally with our families. And believe me, I've been in the situation with mine as well. There's a lot of investment. So the first thing I think is just to recognize this is not going to be the same. It's good that you're like, I'm not this person's therapist. I think in some cases, it's more important to be a really, really close friend, and then rely a bit on the listening tools from your profession, as opposed to the other way around. Yeah, because your friend needs a companion. They need someone who is really there, who gets it, who gets them, who receives how they're feeling. And of course, we're going to feel that through empathy, we're going to feel some of those feelings that they're having. Some of that is also, as I mentioned, I think, feeling helpless and being able to help this person to figure out what will make a difference. And the role is different as a loved one or a close friend. So I don't know that it should be different, but I think that the equanimity is not going to feel the same with a beloved or with a friend or a family member than it might in a clinical setting. That's why, I can't be a therapist to my mom. I can't be a counselor to my sister, even though she treats me like I am. I said, "Go, you need a therapist. You need to talk to someone else too. And I'm your brother and I love you and I'm happy to talk to you. But there is someone outside the circle that you also need for support." And so she gets that. She's very wise in her own way. So what do we do about it? And I think that was your question. What can I do in that situation? I think part of it is acknowledging just the helplessness that perhaps you feel in being able to make it better. And just recognize the role of friend is perhaps more important in that moment, and supported by the training that you've had, the skills that you have. But it's a hard thing to juggle both ends equally. But I think we can still practice equanimity with a friend, with a loved one, by kind of relinquishing outcomes. And this is the spine, the strong back. The strong back is the equanimity. It is the stability. It is the neutrality. It doesn't mean you have no passion or love for your friend, but you're able within that love to hold kind of a stable foundation without an attachment to how things will turn out or to the narrative. So that's where we can regain some stability, is being watchful of our expectations or the outcomes we're attached to for our friend, and also the narrative that we might be playing out in our minds about the injustice or the challenges that our friend should not have to endure. When we get into that mind space of judgment and expectation, we're no longer in the unconditional aspect of compassion. Now we have expectation and attachments. So I think from a contemplative standpoint, this is how I will often work with those things, and not let go of the love that I have for this person. Yeah. But just find balance there. Watching the narratives, watching my expectations. What am I needing to see happen here? Those are where the kleshas kind of take root. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's so true, because as we know that people who are abused find it very difficult to leave the abusive situation. So
Right.
here I was just trying so hard with everything I know, everything I can, to make it better and to make it possible for her to leave the situation. But after a week or so of going through this, she decided to just go back. And that's when my suffering really started in a big way, because exactly what you said, I think the attachment to the outcomes. I was attached to the outcome that she was going to leave and make a better life for herself. And I was getting attached to that outcome as well. So that when she decided to just go back and not leave, I just felt devastated.
Well, and I imagine too, part of that is just a fear for her safety.
Yes.
If she's going back into a situation where she's not safe, whether it's emotionally safe, physically safe, that is a concern. You have good reason to be concerned. I think being available is so important, and the fact that I'm sensing anyway that you didn't say, if you go back to him, don't reach back out to me, I won't be your friend anymore, right? But that you're still available if she does come to that realization, if something, God forbid, happens to her, it's a circuitous path, I think, for many people to leave a relationship that's abusive. But I think just being available, is really the way to go until that moment comes. Yeah. And also, I mean, I had this come up last week with a member of my community who was trying to get out, who has gotten out of an abusive relationship with a man who was physically abusive. And we spread the word out to the entire community that this woman needs a place to go immediately. She needs a safe refuge, and all the shelters and all the social services have waiting lists. There's nowhere for her to go. And it got figured out, fortunately. But I think also thinking in terms of community, not just sort of services, governmental services, but community of people. It's hard for one person, I think, no matter who they are, to change that person who is the victim in the relationship, to change their mind. It's not impossible, but I think the more people you have surrounding her, the better. Yeah. So yeah, wishing her well, and safety and wisdom, clarity.
Thank you.
That's a tricky spot, I know.
Thank you for this important dialogue. That's some really deep stuff. So let's go on to Rashmi.
Hi, Rashmi.
Hi, Chris. Thank you.
Hello.
So nice to see you again.
You too.
I have a simpler question. How do I identify situations where I'm responding with heart versus with mind? And how do we start using more of heart? How do we practice it on a daily basis? In extreme situations, it becomes easier to show compassion, to really identify whether we're using heart versus our mind. But on a daily basis, how do we practice it?
Yes, that's a great question. I think it comes down to motivation, knowing our motivation. This is a big theme in Vajrayana Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism overall, is to be mindful of your intention and what is motivating us. If we want to be more heart-centered, which, in many of these traditions, heart and mind are no different, right? In fact, mind implies heart. We have mind training, which is really heart cultivation. But I get what you were saying, and we can have an idea of a rationalization of why we might do something. Maybe it is a good idea. Maybe it's a practical thing. I think the mind is very good at practical things, and sort of dropping into the heart will tell us what is motivating me to do this. My teacher Leslie, who I've had for 30 plus years. She's a South African woman. She doesn't teach anymore. But one of the things that stuck with me that she said almost 2 decades ago was, discernment can sometimes simply be a matter of knowing whether what I do is driven by pain or by love. Just know the difference. If it's pain driven, it means that our motivation is coming either from ego or from a need of some kind or some agenda to prevent something that we're averse to, and so on. But if it's love driven, you're going to feel that. The love drive, in a way, which by the way was a Scorpions album. They were a heavy metal band back in the 70s. But that particular motivation usually will yield a different action. And so I think it's just discerning, where is this motivation coming from? Is it pain driven? Is it love driven? And yeah, I feel like that's really all I can say, but does that help?
Yes, it does. I have one more small
Sure.
one. I'm new to Buddhism. I love reading biographies, stories of folks. So I'd love to read about Tathagat. Any books that you would recommend?
Yeah. I'd have to think about that. I think it would also depend. You know, Buddhism is many different traditions. But it would help to know a little bit more about specifically what you have been resonating with, what you've been reading, and also what tradition maybe might be good. And feel free, what we can do is, if you'd like to email me, I'm happy to maybe have a conversation elsewhere, just to see what you might find beneficial around Buddhism.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. And anyone is welcome to email me, to just reach out to me with questions, further questions or resources. Right now, I'm in the really, really super busy time of the start of the academic year, so it might take me a little to get back to you, but I'm doing 4 classes, so there's a lot happening on my end. But I'm happy to hear from anyone and also be of any help I can.
And so again, if there's any questions, please raise your hand. Chris, I'd like to dive a little bit more into just your thoughts about the heart versus the mind. Do you find any, let's say, when you talk about the heart, do you find, what's its relationship with the unconscious versus the conscious mind? And when you ask something, do you find maybe the heart is sort of the unconscious, is that the first response, the first thing that comes out, as opposed to the mind has a logical, rational basis to things. When we start thinking through things, is that the mind, what we mean by the mind, as opposed to the heart, which is more of a intuitive sensation that springs us spontaneously, that sometimes we listen to, that we block it out because we're trying to justify, we're trying to rationalize, so most of the answers I find, if we don't allow the heart to speak, we block it out with the mind. Can you maybe have a few thoughts you'd like to share about that?
This is an important thing, because so many of us get caught between these two this paradox of heart and mind.
Sure.
I feel like it's helpful actually to look at neuroscience, and first of all to look at the different parts of the brain that are in tension with each other, right? So first you have the reptilian brain, or like the fight, flight, freeze response, the basic core brain with the brainstem, and then the little bits of nerve fiber bundles that are constantly assessing threat. And then on top of that, you have this more evolved brain called the limbic system, which is like basically the second part of the brain, and it's still internal. But that's really the center of emotions. It's very much subject to stress, it's interacting with that reptilian brain, so threats and emotional memories, feelings, all of those things, the capacity to be positive or the tendency to be negative, those are all happening in that part of the brain. Yeah. And then we start looking at the third layer of the brain, which is the cortical layer. It's the neocortex. It's the top layer that wraps around all those other two sections. Now, of course, it's more complicated than that, and there are different lobes: parietal lobe, temporoparietal junction, all of these different parts of the brain. But they're all kind of conveying different data sometimes. So like the rational mind is very practical in many ways. It's seeking to use reason and understanding, but only insofar as it already knows. It's like a computer. It only has so much programming in it before it will just start playing the same program. The limbic system sometimes will not match what's going on in the cortical layer. We know better, and yet we love this person, but we know they're not good for us. These are the two parts that are just not syncing up to do what's best for us. So, I mean, I think for one thing, it's on one hand, it's helpful, I think, to look at just what we're stuck in, right? That this is not always so easy to reconcile for a reason that is based in our brain biology. But we're not helpless to it, because with intention, with really intentional focus, we can pay attention to both parts. We can pay attention to, here's the feeling, here are the thoughts, here's the cognition coming from the cortical layer of the brain. Well, what if, in fact, there was a part of us that was able to hold all of it? And of course, I think Vedanta is no different. Yoga, Buddhism, this capacity to bring a sense of fullness, wholeness into that apparent paradox. And sometimes when I work with someone around having to make a difficult choice in one's life, we'll sort of get out of the spinning mind, the mind spin, and get down into the heart and seek kind of the heart of that wisdom, the intuition, the one that already knows the truth. And sometimes it takes sort of guiding someone there through a meditation practice and just to get out of that mind space. That's kind of also, the heart is also the source of that wisdom. It's the source of intuitive wisdom. It's the one that already knows. I mean, maybe we know this already, but in many of these South Asian traditions and philosophies, consciousness arises not from the brain, but from the heart. This is a source. Hridaya is one of the words in Buddhism, is that heart mind that arises from here. And the brain is there to help sort of process things. It can be very good, practical, it can be creative, all of those things, imaginal. But sometimes when we get stuck with decision making, it's because we don't know how to reach the intuition of the heart. We're really cut off from it because there's a lot at stake. The limbic brain, the reptilian brain is going, if we make the wrong mistake, everything will fall apart, I'll lose control, and then what? Yeah. So sometimes it's just really allowing the heart to say, here's the truth. We may not like it.
Yeah. Sounds like also you got to, let go of the baggage to get the clear.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. If possible, we put the baggage aside to hear what's really going on.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to follow your own advice, but at least you know what the truth is.
Yeah. Raj, why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hi, Raj. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Chris. Thanks again for your time. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're sounding good.
Two questions. First one is a quick one. You offered to send an email. I don't know if I have your email address.
Chris, is it okay if I put your email address in the text box?
Yeah, you can put it in the chat. Yeah,
I'll put it in the text box, okay?
either the Harvard one or the Clear Path.
Sure.
Clear Path meditation one. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. All right. You've studied the Hindu traditions as well, in addition to Vajrayana tradition, Dzogchen, and so on. Have you just to contrast between what you've seen as the difference between how the Hindu tradition, Vedanta tradition approaches karma versus the Buddhist traditions? Have you noticed anything major, or would you say it's 99% the same? Just curious on your take about it.
Yeah, I mean the root of this doctrine of karma is common to. I mean, this goes all the way back. Yeah, it's pretty much the same in both traditions. Now, I think Swami could answer the Vedanta view a little more clearly about how is karma talked about in Vedanta teachings. In Buddhism, the Buddha was very clear. He said, you cannot know fully the extent of your karma in past lives. You cannot know the extent of karma and how it will play out in future lifetimes, because karma is directly related to rebirth, death, rebirth. So all you have is this lifetime to focus on the karma of this life, and even focus on the karma in this moment and every moment you can. Yeah, this is what mindfulness as remembering is about, is remembering to pay attention, to attend to, like we were just talking about motivation, tendencies, samskaras, vasanas, those things. Just being aware of what is motivating me. If it's heart-centered, if it's motivated by wisdom, we're changing an awful lot of karma with just a simple good deed, yeah, or a good intention. We have this in Vajrayana. You do one small thing with complete compassion, and you can basically purify a lot of negative karma or unwholesome karma with just a small gesture or thought that has really deep, deep good intention. Now, in the Vedanta, I believe the structure of our subtle bodies, we're seen to have, of course, we have the antakarana, I believe, the ego, the buddhi, and the manas, the lower mind. We also have what's called the jiva, or soul. And I think and correct me, Swami, if I'm wrong about any of this, but the jiva, or what we call in English the soul, is that which contains the karma, the residual sort of substance of karma, as opposed to Atman, which is the divine within, it's Brahman within ourselves. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, Chris. Karma is not in the divine Atman. So different
Right.
places say different things. Yoga Sutras say karma shaya, but think of the karma as being stored in the subtle causal body like that.
Right. Causal body. Yeah, because you also have the sheaths, right? The koshas.
Yes.
But I think the thing that seems very common to both traditions is that misperceiving reality to be, misperceiving illusion to be reality is really one of the causes of unwholesome karma and also unwholesome deeds. And so I think especially the non-dual tradition of Vajrayana and Advaita Vedanta share a lot of ground together. This is why the first thing I said at Asilomar was, I come to you as a cousin. Because I had no idea why Swami would want a Buddhist coming to this wonderful retreat. But for me, there is some common ground here. And I think, if we're going to piece apart the different aspects, states of consciousness, of mind, the subtle body, and all of these, we can easily get into the weeds. So it's helpful to study and to know these things. But I think it's even more helpful just to know that attuning to our motivation, our intention, and continuing to practice, whether it's karma yoga, raja yoga, jhana yoga, or bhakti, or all four, we're not doing anything that different from what Buddhists are seeking to do as well. I mean, they come from the same roots, the Upanishadic roots. So I would have to say, and this could be argued, but I would say that in that context, yes, they're the same.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Your thoughtful responses.
Chris, I think the basic structure within Vedanta, and I'd say similar in Buddhism also, is that karma comes from, desire. Desire comes from ignorance. So you have avidya, kama, which is desire, karma. That karma then creates action. That action creates then samskaras, seeds that get deposited. They'll spring up again to create desire. So it falls within this circle.
There's the wheel.
The hub of the circle is the avidya, and I think in Buddhism, we call it, what's the the ignorance. What do we call that in Buddhism? The
Avidya.
avidya, yeah. So
Yeah,
avidya,
avidya
same
is yeah.
cycle. Avidya, karma. Then you have actions and samskaras, and again repeating the same cycle again.
Yep, yeah. We've been actually I lead a Sunday night meditation group on Zoom, and we've been doing the 12 links of dependent arising, which is a doctrine in Buddhism that begins with ignorance. Ignorance is the beginning of setting that karmic wheel in motion,
Right.
so that karma is the second one. So ignorance leads to karma. Karma then leads to an impulse in a certain direction, and it goes on name and form, and then the senses are involved, and ultimately we have a really nice neural pathway, or otherwise known as karmic tendency, towards something that it's thought that will carry on into our next life. Yeah.
Would I ask one quick follow-up?
Sure.
You mentioned early on in your response about the Buddha said not to dwell upon that. Were you referring to one of the imponderables that he said it would be unhelpful to dwell on that? Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, you get lost in the weeds if you're
Okay.
dwelling on past karma. You can't possibly know the extent, or sitting in anxiety of future karma. So what we can work with is in this lifetime. And so this is why, there are a lot of Westerners who are like, yeah, I don't know about this karma things, death and rebirth thing. It's like, fine, you don't have to believe in transmigration if you focus on what you can focus on in this lifetime.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raj.
Subhash, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Subhash.
Hi, Chris. Howard.
I hope you're well.
It's very nice to
you
see you again. Thank you. I'm sorry I joined late because the link that Swami sent in the email was for previous meeting. So anyway, I'm glad I found this one and joined it
About that.
a bit late.
It's your comment to find us.
Yeah. I had asked this question at the retreat too, but I was not very clear on your answer. So let me repeat that and let's see if we can clarify. Sri Ramakrishna in the gospel, when this discussion was going on about compassion, and doing good to others, he was in abstract mood and he comes down and he says, compassion, who are you to do compassion? You are an insignificant jiva. You should be doing daya. You should be doing service, see God in others and serve, and not compassion. He thinks by that, I think he was saying that you are considering yourself too high to be doing compassion to others. So how do you deal with that because Buddhism is all compassion, right? So how do we address that?
Well, it's not just Buddhism, but if we look out at the world and we see what a lack of compassion has wrought in the world of samsara and suffering, we can see how important it is. And not to go against Sri Ramakrishna in his teaching. I think that a lot of these teachings have to really be taken within their contexts. And I cannot speak on behalf of any other teachers or beings or any wise sages or what have you. But I think the notion that in the Yoga Sutras, that there are also in Buddhism, these 4 qualities called the Brahma Viharas. And they're mentioned, I think it's in the second pada, I'm not positive, of the Yoga Sutras, where we must cultivate a sense of friendliness, of beneficial, genuine loving intent, friendliness, not just for ourselves, but for others. And the second part of that is to cultivate karuna. If we leave karuna out of it, then we're really disconnected. We're disconnecting from others, and we're fragmented. We may have great devotion to the Guru, to Ramakrishna, to Brahman, to Ishvara, Ishvara Pranidhana, the devotion, or to the Buddha, whomever. But if we forsake others who are suffering, then we're fragmenting. And so this is why in Buddhism we see these four of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity as being immeasurable qualities. They are boundless, and we simply need to see that they are boundless and cultivate them. There are meditation practices to really learn to realize this process of self-realization, to see that these are immeasurable, that we have this capacity naturally. And that is perhaps one way to think of it is this is the divine, the Atman, has these characteristics already. And yes, you're right. Buddhism, at least Mahayana Buddhism, is largely about compassion and attending to suffering. This is the ideal of the Bodhisattva. I will not attain full enlightenment so long as one blade of grass continues to suffer. I will turn back towards the world and help any way I can.
I think
It doesn't negate bhakti. It doesn't negate love of the divine.
right.
It's more all-inclusive than just focused on one thing. And maybe they're the same at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
I think what Sri Ramakrishna was emphasizing was while you're doing this, helping others, make sure you have humility, don't do with the sense, like expect gratitude out of it.
Exactly.
His example of
Yeah.
Vidyasagar, he is a great philanthropist in his time, and he did a lot of good. But then towards the end of his life, he got bitter because people, those he helped, turned against him, and then he was really disillusioned with that and said, "Do good, but
Yeah.
don't expect anything. In fact, even the other ones criticize you, ignore it because you are doing it for your own sake, for your own benefit."
It sounds to me like it means he was successful.
Chris, I'd like to interject. Subhash, I gave a lecture on this.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
And if you look at, and you'll see me redefine Daya, because Swami Jagannath defines Daya as compassion. But if you look at it within the context, I make a case and argument. Actually, the meaning of Daya here is mercy. And so he's saying also mercy. And the sense of mercy here, Ramakrishna is saying, don't have a sense of hierarchy. So Ramakrishna was, in one sense, in the lecture, you'll see, don't have the sense of superiority complex. Don't have the sense of power where you're looking below. Don't have the sense of when you're serving with pride and prestige. Don't have the sense of entitlement. So there's a whole case, and that you'll start to see what Ramakrishna meant by when he talked about Daya. So yes, it's commonly translated as compassion, but that was not the meaning. And I give explanations of what Daya actually means in the context. And so you listen to the talk, the one especially in Santa Barbara, you'll get a better understanding, I feel, of what Ramakrishna meant by Daya, not Seva, but Daya. And then you'll start to see how Vivekananda took that concept of the attitude and then how he developed it, serving God and man, serving the divine in human beings. So you listen to that, I think you'll get a better understanding. Okay, that's a good question you've asked.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, if you can send a link to it, maybe in the chat or maybe later on by private email, that'd be good.
I'd like to see it also, Swami, if you don't mind. Yeah, it sounds really cool. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Subhash. Good to see you.
Thanks, Swamiji, for clearing this more. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Indranil, hello.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Good seeing you again.
Good seeing you again.
Hope you're well.
Yes. So two things. My understanding of the compassion, I don't have the gospel with me right now. I mean, I have it, but I didn't want to turn it. But when I read that part, as Swamiji explained, the tinge of humility is there, and Subhash, you also mentioned, I thought it was more about sympathy versus compassion. I don't know. I thought maybe when you have sympathy, you might have that little pride in yourself, but compassion doesn't have that. So, I mean, I don't remember the exact word used in that, but I took it as sympathy, not to have sympathy in a sense that, as Swamiji explained, that you think that you are higher than the other being, but compassion probably could be at the same level or as a mode of serving. But anyway, other than that, so I have a very cliched question, and I'm sure you have probably everybody knows this, but I'm very new to Buddhism. I want to know, Buddhism talks about emptiness and nothingness, and in Advaita we talk about self. So what is the relation? Is there any, I mean, is there any real distinction apart from the word? But anyway, I think you know what I'm asking.
I love this. I love this question. Actually, I think Swami and we had a Sunday night gathering where we had a discussion about something similar. Yeah, I think first of all, the word shunyata in Buddhism is often mistranslated as emptiness or voidness. Those are the worst translations of a state that actually it means deep, profound fullness without content. So what we're talking about, in my opinion, is not that different from the state of asamprajñata samadhi. Samadhi in yoga meditation, samadhi without content, where we are just sort of resting in what in Vedanta we might call sakshin, or this luminous, bright, pure consciousness that is at the heart of who we are as Atman. That is not different from, particularly in Vajrayana, the union of this profound fullness without content that is supremely open, and luminosity. Jyotismati, luminous mind. The Buddha said luminous is this mind brilliantly shining, free of all attachments. And it is free of all attachments. But he also said luminous is this mind brilliantly shining, and it can be colored by the attachments. It doesn't mean that the light changes, but there's a filter over it. And so part of the endeavor here is to encounter this prabhasvara citta, this luminous mind at the heart of who we are. But it's bright and clear and contentless, and yet it is effulgent. It is an experience of profound fullness and love and bliss. This sounds suspiciously like other traditions, right?
Yeah.
There are different names, there are different ways for some of these states. My opinion, they're not different. They're just sort of using different tools, different toolkits, and they're actually not so different. In Tibetan Buddhism, we have yogas, quote unquote, 6 yogas of Naropa, which are sort of the Tibetan variants, if you will, of some of the earlier, the Shaivite tantras and things from the Kundalini Upanishad, that led to some of the esoteric practices in Indian traditions. So it's a colorful landscape. It's a very colorful landscape, but where it's pointing is to just a profound sense of open, clear, bright awareness, what's called the Dharmakaya in Buddhism, which is the pure consciousness of a liberated mind. The thing that might be different is what we might call the theology at Harvard Divinity School. This notion of what is Brahman as opposed to Svabhavika Kaya. We have these 4 bodies of an enlightened being. We have Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, Dharmakaya, and Svabhavikakaya. And actually there are other kayas too, other bodies that represent much, much more refined, subtle states. But this is just language. These are just concepts trying to help us work skillfully to that point of what has been called emptiness. Yeah, or samadhi, where the self, the dissolution of self is in total union with the absolute.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chris.
Wow.
Thank you, Indranya. Yeah.
I want to thank Chris. Chris, thank you so much for just spending the time being with us and making this retreat a grand success and sharing your knowledge. I do want to tell
you. It was a delight. It was a true delight for me. Yeah.
Chris,
And some of you may not know this, but the last time I had been at Asilomar, was when I was 12 years old, because I'm from the Bay Area, with my father, who passed away 7 years ago. And it was really deep and profound to be there. I had memories of being in that main hall with my dad. My mom says, "Oh, I was there too," but I honestly didn't remember her being there. She goes, "Of course I was there." Sorry, Mom. Anyway, so it was very special for me to be there and also to be with all of you. And yeah, Vedanta is very close to my heart as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
And Chris, you also have a weekly satsang, I believe every Sunday. Would you like to share that, the email with us, with everybody, in case they'd like to join in?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, it's Sunday, every Sunday evening, 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern. So what would that be for? On California time, it would be 4 to 5:30. Yeah, it's a lovely community. I've been teaching this group for 12, 13 years. Through the pandemic, we meet on Zoom. There are others in California who join. And so anybody's welcome to drop in whenever you like. And let me, I'll put in the chat the email. Oh, so clearpathmeditation@gmail. So thank you, Swami, for adding that. If you'd like to join, just shoot me a quick message to that address, and I'll add you to my list. I send out the Zoom link every Sunday. It's the same link, but yeah, join if you'd like. It's a really lovely group of people.
What he does basically just goes over different practices. It's very practice oriented, not so much philosophy, but just practice, different techniques and practices. So if you'd like to learn more about that, and he actually goes through the practices with you. And if you have questions, you feel free to ask any questions. So
Yep.
So just email Chris at that email that I've sent you guys. And thank every one of you.
Great job, Swami. Thank you. Wonderful work. Wow.
Thank you, Chris. I'd like for you to, maybe if you can close us off in a chant.
Yeah, okay. Let's do the Medicine Buddha. This is for healing, for well-being, for all oppression that is happening around the world, for violence to heal through the peace and the light of lapis lazuli, which is the blue radiant light of medicine. Buddha doesn't have to be Buddha, it could be just healing energy. Om Namo Bhagavate Vaishaja Guru Vai Durya Prabha Rajaya Tatgatiyar Hati Samyaksham Buddhaya Teata Om Bekanze Maha Bekanze Rajaya Samungate Soha. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Let me unmute everyone so that if you'd like to just say any words of thanks to Chris. See here.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you all.
Thank
you very much. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks,
So nice
Swamiji.
to see your soft smiling eyes. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Chris and Swami.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Swami.
Thank you.
Swamiji. You're a star, Swamiji.
Thank
Yes, you
you.
are. Swami, thank you. So good to see you and be with you all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you. See you
Okay.
shortly.
Bye.
Jai Ma.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you, Chris. Bye-bye.
Jai Ma. Jai